So I was just I just graduated from college, and I was living a single life in a second-story apartment in Sacramento. I was just having a normal life of a 20-something, and one morning I was awoken earlier morning by a man in a hoodie coming at me with a knife. He proceeded to sexually assault me for quite some time. I grabbed a knife, so there was some cuts and bleeding that happened. After he left, it took many years before we were able to capture him, and that was through the DNA warrant. The statute of limitations was running out, so Anne-Marie established a DNA warrant based on his DNA rather than his name. We kind of knew this had to be a serial assailant because there had been many victims in the area with a kind of similar story to mine. And so anyway, eventually that led to his arrest, and we had a trial where he was convicted on only my case and the jury hung on the other cases. I think the decision was made to not try those other cases because he was charged with 65 years for the crime that he committed to me.
And let me ask you, because this happened at a time where kind of even the notions around sexual assault were different, or the victims and the statute of limitations and all of that was different at that time. Can you kind of take me back to that time and how it was different, or how you've perceived things have changed?
I think it's changed substantially at that point. I think victims were more shamed. I wouldn't have come out publicly like I'm doing now. I don't know if shamed was a word. There wasn't it feels different these days to talk about sexual assault. Just the fact that there was a statute of limitations gave me a sense that it wasn't a crime that was supposedly as serious as it feels when it happens to you and changes your life. So I think that's the difference.
My sister was a victim of sexual assault as well. It hits up close to home. I know that it's a terrible crime. It's a crime against the soul, especially when you're a young woman at that age and you have your whole life ahead of you. Can you kind of explain to me what it did to you as a result of experiencing this?
It's hard to know the person I would have been if this hadn't happened. I do know that, for several years, I was so afraid of everything and everyone, and I was afraid to go out. I ended up, right after that, I moved back in with my parents for almost a year before I could venture out and try to get back into adulthood and gain my independence. I had to work really hard to have a normal life. And I have a relative who had a stroke, and they tell you when you have a stroke, there's a piece of your brain that dies and doesn't come back. And I kind of think of that as an example or analogy. I feel like a piece of me died, and a piece of you dies when that happens. It doesn't mean that you don't compensate in other ways, but you just don't know. So it's a really tough thing to go through. I like to think it made me stronger, and I'm happy with my life today. But given the choice, I'd rather definitely not have gone through that experience, and I would hate for anyone else to go through that, especially when many of these perpetrators continue to assault. I think you're on mute.
I was, yeah, sorry about that. Let me ask you about the fact that Robinson is going to be up for parole. What does that say to you?
I thought I would handle it better than I am, but since I heard the news, I've been pretty shaky. It kind of brings me back to that feeling I had before he was, for 7 or 8 years, he was on the streets and I was on the streets in Sacramento living my life, not knowing if he was standing behind me in a grocery store. And it was such a relief to know that he was finally behind bars. I had a sense of security, of justice. With the possibility of him getting out again or being out there, I'm worried that I'll have that same sense of, is he in this building? Is he behind me in the grocery store? I'm still in the Sacramento area. I don't know if he will be or not. So it just makes me feel pretty insecure. And it's not as if he's coming out, you know, an old man. If he is to come out, 50 years old is, I mean, I'm that age. So I feel like there's nothing that would stop him from committing these crimes again. And yeah, I guess it just makes me feel really unsafe and insecure.
Let me also ask you, obviously this is because of California's laws that this is even a possibility. What would you say to people in power about an example like this and what that says about what our laws should be?
You know, I'm an educator. That's been my passion since this happened. I think lawmakers need to look at prevention, but once there's a perpetrator who's committed violent crimes that's shown a capacity to continue to do so, I think that is not the time to be implementing these laws, because there are so many people out there that could be victimized. And so I think when lawmakers are doing that, they're forgetting the victims. They're forgetting what these kind of crimes do to families, and not just to me, not just to the victims, but to the families. And it's just short-sighted, and it's not fair when we're supposed to have a system of justice. There's no equity in it.
So as this, obviously the DA is pretty upset about this as well. What would you like to say to the viewing audience, or what would you say to people who are now going to be paying attention to this case?
I would like to say, you know, to prevent these crimes, do that early so these crimes don't happen. And once these crimes have happened, or if there's a possibility of someone being dangerous, it's really important to don't forget the victims. Don't forget us out there who expected justice, went through horrible ordeals of a trial. A trial is no fun at all, especially for a rape victim who goes through that, trusts the system, and then this happens. You're going to have victims that aren't even going to want to come forward.